Sarah Viper Martinez wiped the grease from her hands as she stepped away from the F-16 Fighting Falcon. The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on Nellis Air Force Base, but she barely noticed the heat anymore. What she did notice were the sideways glances from her male colleagues as they walked past the hangar. Some tried to hide their stares, others didn't bother. "Hey Martinez, you sure you can reach the pedals in that thing?" called out Captain Rick Thompson, his voice carrying that familiar tone of condescension wrapped in fake humor. His buddies laughed on cue, their voices echoing in the massive hangar. Sarah had heard every variation of this joke over the past 3 years. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall, which some people seemed to think disqualified her from flying one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world. What they didn't know was that she had modified her seat and pedal configurations perfectly, and her reaction times were faster than 90% of the pilots on the base. "I can reach everything that matters, Thompson," she replied without looking up from her pre-flight checklist, "including the trigger." The laughter died down quickly. Sarah had earned her call sign Viper, not because of her personality, but because of her precision in air-to-air combat simulations. When she locked onto a target, she struck with deadly accuracy. Her instructors at the Air Force Academy had been amazed by her natural flying ability, but that seemed forgotten now that she was trying to prove herself in the real world. Colonel James Harrison emerged from his office overlooking the hangar floor. He was old-school military, the kind of officer who believed certain jobs were meant for certain people. Sarah could feel his disapproval every time he looked at her, though he was careful never to voice it directly. The military had rules about discrimination, but it couldn't control attitudes. "Martinez, you're grounded pending review," Harrison announced, his voice cutting through the hangar noise. "There's been another complaint about your aggressive flying during training exercises." Sarah felt her stomach drop. This was the 3rd time in 2 months that someone had complained about her flying style. The accusations were always the same: too aggressive, too risky, showing off. But when male pilots flew the exact same way, they were called bold and fearless. "Sir, I followed all protocols during yesterday's exercise," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. "My maneuvers were within acceptable parameters." "That's not what Lieutenant Foster reported," Harrison replied coldly. "He says you nearly caused a mid-air collision during the dogfight simulation." Sarah knew exactly what Harrison was referring to. During the training exercise, she had executed a perfect barrel roll that put her directly behind Foster's aircraft, giving her a clear shot in the simulation. It was a textbook maneuver, one that any experienced pilot would recognize as skillful rather than reckless. But Foster had been embarrassed to be outmaneuvered by the only woman in the squadron. "Foster broke formation first, sir," Sarah explained. "I was maintaining proper distance when I executed the maneuver. The flight data will confirm that." "The review board will determine what the flight data shows," Harrison said dismissively. "Until then, you're restricted to ground duties. Report to maintenance at 600 tomorrow." As Harrison walked away, Sarah felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the hangar. Some of her fellow pilots looked sympathetic, but most just seemed relieved that the troublemaker was being dealt with. She had worked her entire life for this opportunity, graduating top of her class from the Air Force Academy, excelling in every training program, and proving herself capable time and again. But none of that seemed to matter when prejudice was involved. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her small apartment off base, staring at a framed photo of her father. Captain Miguel Martinez had been killed in action when Sarah was 12 years old, shot down while flying a mission over enemy territory. He had always told her that flying was in their blood, that the sky was where the Martinez family belonged. She wondered what he would think of her situation now. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her younger brother Carlos. "Saw the news about women being cleared for more combat roles. Maybe things are changing, sis." Sarah smiled sadly. Things were changing, but not fast enough. The official policies were evolving, but the culture was lagging far behind. She had entered the military hoping to serve her country and honor her father's memory. But instead she found herself fighting battles on the ground before she could even engage enemies in the sky. The next morning, Sarah reported to the maintenance hangar as ordered. Chief Master Sergeant Patricia Wells, one of the few senior enlisted women on base, handed her a clipboard with inspection schedules. "I know this isn't what you signed up for, Martinez," Wells said quietly, "but keep your head down and your skills sharp. Sometimes the best way to prove them wrong is to be so good they can't ignore you anymore." Sarah spent the day checking hydraulic systems and updating maintenance logs, Work that was important but felt like punishment. She watched through the hangar windows as other pilots took off for training missions, their jets screaming into the clear desert sky. Each takeoff felt like a reminder of what she was missing, what was being kept from her. But Sarah Martinez was not someone who gave up easily. Her father had taught her that obstacles were just challenges waiting to be overcome. As she worked on the aircraft that others got to fly, she studied every system, memorized every specification, and planned for the day when she would get another chance to prove that she belonged in the cockpit. What she didn't know was that very soon, her country would need every capable pilot it could find, and prejudice would become a luxury they couldn't afford. 3 weeks into her grounding, Sarah was elbow-deep in an engine compartment when the alarm bells started ringing across Nellis Air Force Base. The piercing sound of the base-wide alert system cut through the normal hangar noise like a knife. Every person on the floor stopped what they were doing and looked toward the speakers mounted on the walls. "All personnel, this is not a drill." The announcement crackled through the intercom system. "Report to designated stations immediately. Threat level elevated to DEFCON 3. Sarah had never heard a real DEFCON 3 alert before. During her training, she had participated in drills, but the urgency in the announcer's voice was different this time. Around her, maintenance crews were already moving with practiced efficiency, securing equipment and preparing for whatever was coming. Chief Wells appeared at Sarah's side, her face grim. "Martinez, forget the engine work. We need all aircraft combat ready within 2 hours. Something big is happening." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah worked alongside experienced maintenance crews, performing final checks on F-16s and F-22 Raptors. The pilots who usually ignored her were now too focused on their own preparations to bother with their usual comments. Everyone could feel the tension in the air, the sense that this was no ordinary training exercise. Through the hangar's open doors, Sarah could see unusual activity across the base. Additional security personnel were manning checkpoints, and several large transport aircraft had landed that weren't part of the regular schedule. Military police vehicles raced between buildings, their lights flashing urgently. "What do you think is happening?" asked Airman First Class Johnson, a young maintenance worker who had always been friendly to Sarah despite the squadron's overall attitude. "I don't know," Sarah replied, tightening a bolt on a wing-mounted missile launcher. "But whatever it is, they're taking it seriously." Colonel Harrison appeared in the hangar doorway, his face more serious than Sarah had ever seen it. Behind him walked a woman in a general's uniform that Sarah didn't recognize. The general surveyed the hangar with sharp eyes, taking in the frantic preparation activities. "Status report," Harrison barked at Chief Wells. 12 aircraft fully mission capable, sir. 2 more will be ready within the hour." Wells responded crisply. The general nodded and pulled Harrison aside for a private conversation. Sarah couldn't hear what they were saying, but she noticed Harrison glancing in her direction several times. Whatever they were discussing, it seemed to involve her somehow. 20 minutes later, Harrison approached Sarah's workstation. His usual cold demeanor was replaced by something she had never seen before: uncertainty. "Martinez, you're needed in the briefing room. Now," he said curtly. Sarah wiped her hands on a rag and followed Harrison across the base to the main operations building. The corridors were bustling with personnel she didn't recognize, many of them carrying classified folders and speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The atmosphere reminded her of movies about war rooms during major crises. The briefing room was packed with pilots, intelligence officers, and senior commanders. Large screens on the walls displayed satellite imagery and radar tracks that Sarah couldn't immediately interpret. At the front of the room stood the same general she had seen in the hangar, along with several other high-ranking officers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the general began, her voice carrying easily through the room, "I'm General Patricia Morrison from NORAD. 6 hours ago, our early warning systems detected multiple unidentified aircraft approaching our airspace from the northwest. These aircraft have ignored all attempts at radio contact and have demonstrated flight capabilities that exceed anything in our intelligence files." A murmur went through the room. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Unidentified aircraft with superior capabilities could only mean one thing. Either an unknown foreign military was testing American defenses, or something even more serious was happening. General Morrison continued, "Initial attempts to intercept these aircraft resulted in the loss of 2 F-22 Raptors. Both pilots ejected safely, but reported that their aircraft systems malfunctioned when they approached the unknown targets. We need every available pilot for what may become the most critical air defense mission in our nation's history. Sarah's mind raced. 2 F-22 Raptors lost with system malfunctions. The F-22 was the most advanced fighter jet in the world, with electronic warfare capabilities that should have protected it from any known threat. Whatever they were facing was unlike anything the military had encountered before. Colonel Harrison has informed me that you have one of the most naturally gifted pilots on this base currently grounded, General Morrison said, her eyes finding Sarah in the crowd. Lieutenant Martinez stepped forward. Sarah felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward her as she made her way to the front. Some of the looks were surprised, others skeptical. She recognized several pilots who had never taken her seriously, and she could see the confusion on their faces. Lieutenant, I've reviewed your training records and flight performance data, General Morrison continued. Your reaction times and spatial awareness scores are in the top 1% of all pilots tested in the past decade. Your simulation performance in electronic warfare scenarios is exceptional. We need those skills today. Colonel Harrison cleared his throat. General, I should mention that Lieutenant Martinez is currently under review for aggressive flying. Colonel, General Morrison interrupted, her voice sharp. Today, aggressive flying might be exactly what we need. Lieutenant Martinez, are you ready to serve your country? Sarah straightened to attention. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Good. You'll be flying with Hawk Squadron, callsign Viper. Your mission is to intercept and identify these unknown aircraft using any means necessary. You'll have the most advanced electronic countermeasures available, and you'll be working directly with NORAD Command. As the general continued with the mission briefing, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and determination coursing through her veins. After weeks of being treated like she didn't belong, she was finally being given the chance to prove what she could do. More importantly, her country needed her skills, and she wasn't going to let personal prejudices get in the way of serving. The briefing ended with assignments and takeoff schedules. As pilots began filing out to prepare for their missions, General Morrison approached Sarah directly. Lieutenant, I want you to know that I specifically requested you for this mission. Your country doesn't have the luxury of prejudice right now. We need our best pilots in the air, regardless of what they look like or what anyone thinks they should be doing. Don't let us down. I won't, ma'am, Sarah replied firmly. Thank you for the opportunity. As Sarah left the briefing room and headed back toward the hangar, she felt a strange calm settling over her. All the months of doubt, discrimination, and frustration were falling away. In a few hours, she would be flying a mission that could determine the security of her nation. Everything she had trained for, everything her father had taught her about service and sacrifice had led to this moment. The sky was calling, and Sarah Viper Martinez was finally ready to answer. The pre-flight preparations felt different this time. Sarah moved through her checklist with a focused intensity she had never experienced before, each switch and gauge check carrying the weight of national security. Her F-16 had been equipped with specialized electronic warfare pods that she had only read about in classified manuals. Whatever they were expecting to encounter up there, the military was taking no chances. Chief Wells approached as Sarah completed her external inspection. Martinez, this bird has been loaded with our most advanced countermeasure systems. The electronics package is experimental, so trust your instincts if the computers start acting strange. Roger that. Chief, Sarah replied, running her hand along the sleek fuselage of the fighter jet. Any word on what happened to the F-22 pilots? Wells lowered her voice. Both reported complete electrical failure when they got within 10 miles of the unknowns. Engines died, avionics went dark, everything. They barely had time to eject before their aircraft went into uncontrolled spins. Sarah felt a chill despite the desert heat. Complete electrical failure was almost impossible in modern fighter aircraft. The F-22 systems had multiple backups and hardening against electromagnetic interference. Whatever had caused those failures was beyond anything in their threat assessment databases. Viper, this is Tower Control. Her radio crackled. You're cleared for takeoff on runway 27. Good hunting. Sarah strapped herself into the cockpit and began the startup sequence. The familiar hum of the engines and the glow of the instrument panel helped calm her nerves. This was where she belonged, where all her training and natural abilities came together. No amount of prejudice could take away her skill as a pilot. As she taxied toward the runway, she could see other aircraft from Hawk Squadron already in position. Major David Razor Kim would be leading the formation, with Sarah flying as his wingman. Razor was one of the few pilots who had never treated her differently because of her gender, and she was grateful to be flying with someone she trusted. Hawk Squadron. This is NORAD Command, came a new voice over the radio. Unknown contacts are currently 200 miles northwest of your position. Altitude 60,000 feet. Speed Mach 2.5 and increasing. They're heading directly towards Seattle metropolitan area. Sarah's blood ran cold. Seattle was home to over 4 million people, including major military installations and aerospace manufacturing facilities. If these unknown aircraft had hostile intentions, the consequences could be catastrophic. Roger, NORAD Command. Hawk Squadron is airborne and climbing to intercept, Razor responded, his voice steady and professional. Sarah pushed her throttle forward and felt the familiar surge of acceleration as the F-16 climbed rapidly into the thin air. Below them, the Nevada desert spread out like a vast brown carpet, but her attention was focused on the radar display showing the approaching contacts. Viper, stay tight on my wing, Razor instructed. We'll approach from the south and attempt visual identification before engaging. Copy that. Razor, staying in formation. As they climbed through 50,000 feet, Sarah's radar warning receiver began picking up unusual signals. The display showed electromagnetic emissions unlike anything in her threat library, pulsing with a pattern that seemed almost organic rather than mechanical. Hawk Leader, I'm picking up some strange radar signatures, Sarah reported. The emission patterns don't match any known aircraft types. Same here, Viper. NORAD Command, are you seeing this telemetry? Affirmative, Hawk Squadron. We're analyzing the data now. Continue approach, but maintain defensive spacing. At 65,000 feet, Sarah finally got her first visual contact with the unknown aircraft. What she saw made her question everything she knew about aviation technology. The objects were sleek and triangular, but they moved with impossible smoothness and agility. No visible engines or control surfaces, yet they maneuvered as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. NORAD Command. I have visual on 3 unknown aircraft, Sarah reported, her voice tight with concentration. They don't appear to be following conventional aerodynamic principles. No visible propulsion systems, but they're maintaining Mach 2.5 at 65,000 feet. Can you identify country of origin or military markings? NORAD Command asked. Sarah adjusted her targeting system for a closer look. The aircraft were unlike anything she had ever seen in intelligence briefings. Their surfaces seemed to shift and shimmer, making it difficult to focus on details even with her advanced optics. Negative on markings or national identification. These don't look like anything in our threat assessment files. Suddenly, her radar warning receiver exploded with alarms. The unknown aircraft had detected Hawk Squadron and were beginning some kind of electronic countermeasure. Sarah's instrument panel flickered as wave after wave of electromagnetic interference washed over her aircraft. Razor. I'm getting massive electronic interference, Sarah called out, fighting to maintain control as her flight management systems began malfunctioning. Same here, Viper. All aircraft, switch to backup navigation systems and prepare for possible electrical failure. This was exactly what had happened to the F-22 pilots, Sarah realized. Whatever technology these unknown aircraft possessed, it could disable conventional military electronics at range. But something was different about her situation. While her primary systems were being interfered with, her aircraft was still responding to manual controls. NORAD Command, this is Viper, Sarah transmitted, switching to an emergency frequency that seemed less affected by the interference. I still have partial control. Recommend I attempt closer approach for detailed reconnaissance. Negative, Viper. Pull back to safe distance immediately. But Sarah was already committed to her approach. Years of training had taught her to trust her instincts in combat situations, and every instinct she had was telling her that conventional tactics wouldn't work against this threat. If they were going to learn anything useful, someone had to get close enough to gather real intelligence. Razor. I'm going in for a closer look, she announced, breaking formation and accelerating toward the unknown aircraft. Viper returned to formation. That's an order. Sarah ignored the command. She could see that the unknown aircraft were beginning to descend toward Seattle, and every second of delay brought them closer to populated areas. Her F-16 was equipped with the most advanced recording equipment the military possessed, and she might be their only chance to gather the intelligence needed to develop effective countermeasures. As she closed to within 5 miles of the nearest unknown aircraft, Her electronics went completely dark. Engine power fluctuated wildly, and her flight controls became sluggish and unresponsive. But unlike the F-22 pilots, Sarah didn't panic. Instead, she switched to pure manual flying, relying on her natural feel for the aircraft and her exceptional spatial awareness. Through her canopy, she could see the unknown aircraft more clearly than ever before. They were definitely artificial constructs, but their technology was so far advanced that it seemed almost alien. As she watched, one of them began to turn toward her, moving with a grace and speed that defied comprehension. Sarah knew she had only seconds before her aircraft would be completely disabled. But those seconds might be enough to gather the intelligence her country desperately needed. She activated her backup recording systems and held her position, determined to learn everything she could about these mysterious threats, even if it meant risking her life to do it. The unknown aircraft was closing fast, and Sarah could feel her F-16 beginning to lose power completely. But she had gotten what she came for, and now she just had to survive long enough to share it with the world. Sarah's F-16 was dying around her. Every electronic system in the cockpit had either failed completely or was flickering in and out of operation. The engine was running on fumes of power, barely providing enough thrust to keep her airborne. But somehow, through pure flying instinct and manual control, she was still in the air. The unknown aircraft had closed to within 1,000 yards, close enough that Sarah could see details that would change everything. The craft wasn't just advanced technology. It was something that challenged her understanding of what was possible. Its surface seemed to ripple like liquid metal, and it moved without any visible means of propulsion, as if it were swimming through the air rather than flying. NORAD command. "This is Viper," Sarah spoke into her radio, hoping the emergency frequency was still working. "I'm transmitting real-time visual data on the unknown aircraft. You need to see this." Static filled her headset, but she could hear faint voices in the background, indicating that someone was receiving her transmission. Her backup camera system was still functional, powered by a small independent battery that seemed less affected by the electromagnetic interference. As the unknown aircraft drew closer, something unexpected happened. The electromagnetic interference that had been overwhelming her system suddenly diminished. Her radar came back online, and her engine power began to stabilize. It was as if the craft had deliberately reduced its electronic countermeasures. "Incredible," Sarah whispered to herself. "It's scanning me." She could feel something probing her aircraft, not physically but electronically. The unknown craft was somehow analyzing her F-16, learning about its capabilities and technology. But more than that, Sarah had the distinct impression that it was studying her as well, evaluating her as a pilot and as a threat. "Viper, what's your status?" Razor's voice cut through the static. "Your telemetry just came back online." "I'm holding position with the unknown aircraft," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the unprecedented situation. "Razor, you need to know, these aren't from any country on Earth." A long silence followed her statement. Sarah knew how it sounded, but the evidence was right in front of her. The technology she was observing was decades, perhaps centuries, beyond anything human science had achieved. The implications were staggering. "NORAD command, this is Viper. I need to report that the unknown aircraft appear to be of non-terrestrial origin. Repeat, these are not conventional military aircraft." "Viper, maintain current position and continue observations," came the response from NORAD command. "We're analyzing your data feed in real time." The unknown aircraft suddenly began to accelerate away from Sarah's position, moving with impossible speed toward the Seattle metropolitan area. Her instruments showed it reaching Mach 4, then Mach 5 with no sonic boom and no apparent stress on its structure. "NORAD command, unknown aircraft are resuming course toward Seattle. Speed now exceeding Mach 5, roger. Viper, all available interceptor aircraft are being scrambled, but your F-16 is currently the only aircraft that has maintained operational capability in proximity to the unknowns." Sarah understood what they were asking without them having to say it directly. She was the only pilot who had successfully engaged these craft and lived to tell about it. More importantly, her aircraft seemed to have some resistance to their electronic countermeasures, possibly due to the experimental equipment she was carrying. "NORAD command, requesting permission to pursue and continue reconnaissance." "Negative. Viper, these craft have already demonstrated the ability to disable our most advanced fighters. Return to base immediately." But Sarah was already pushing her throttle forward, accelerating after the unknown aircraft. She knew that conventional military thinking wouldn't work against this threat. Someone had to take risks. Someone had to gather the intelligence needed to protect millions of innocent people. "Viper, you are ordered to return to base." Razor's voice was sharp with concern and authority. "Razor, I'm the only one who can stay with them," Sarah replied, her F-16 screaming through the thin air at maximum speed. "My systems are holding up better than anyone else's. I have to try." What Sarah didn't tell them was that she had noticed something else during her close encounter. The unknown craft hadn't attacked her when it clearly could have. Despite its overwhelming technological advantage, it had chosen to study rather than destroy. That suggested intelligence, purpose, and possibly even restraint. As she chased after the craft, Sarah's mind raced through possible explanations. Were they scouts from some foreign power with revolutionary technology? Were they automated probes from an unknown source? Or were they something even more extraordinary? Visitors from beyond Earth who were evaluating humanity's military capabilities. Her radar picked up multiple new contacts ahead. The 3 original craft had been joined by dozens of others, forming a massive formation that was approaching Seattle at incredible speed. But as Sarah watched her instruments, she noticed something else. The new arrivals weren't heading directly for the city center. Instead, they were positioning themselves around Seattle's perimeter, as if establishing some kind of defensive perimeter. "NORAD command. I'm tracking approximately 30 unknown aircraft now arranged in what appears to be a defensive formation around Seattle. They're not attacking the city, they're surrounding it." "Confirmed, Viper. We're seeing the same formation on our long-range radar. What's your assessment?" Sarah studied the flight patterns carefully. The craft were maintaining precise positions relative to each other, creating overlapping fields of coverage that would protect Seattle from aerial threats from any direction. It looked less like an invasion and more like a protection detail. "NORAD command. This formation suggests defensive rather than offensive intentions. They're positioning themselves to protect Seattle, not attack it." "Explain your reasoning, Viper." "The spacing and altitude patterns are consistent with air defense protocols. If they wanted to attack the city, they would approach directly and engage ground targets. Instead, they're creating a defensive umbrella." As if responding to her analysis, Sarah's radio suddenly filled with a new signal, not static or interference, but what sounded almost like speech. The sounds were unlike any human language, but there was definitely an intelligence behind them, trying to communicate. "NORAD command, I'm receiving what appears to be communication attempts from the unknown aircraft. It's not in any language I recognize, but it's definitely structured communication. Continue monitoring, Viper. We're recording everything." Sarah listened carefully to the strange signals. Although she couldn't understand the meaning, the tone seemed urgent but not threatening. It reminded her of emergency radio protocols, as if someone was trying to warn about an incoming danger. Suddenly, her radar exploded with new contacts approaching from the north. These were different from the craft surrounding Seattle. Larger, moving faster, and radiating electromagnetic signatures that felt genuinely hostile. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. The craft around Seattle weren't invaders. They were defenders, and something much worse was coming. The new contacts appeared on Sarah's radar like a swarm of angry hornets. 50, then 100, then more contacts than her targeting system could track individually. These craft were different from the defensive formation around Seattle, larger, more aggressive in their movement patterns, and radiating an electromagnetic signature that made her instruments scream warnings. "NORAD command. I'm tracking massive incoming formation from the north. Count is now over 150 unknown aircraft. Different configuration from the defensive group. They appear to be hostile." The original craft around Seattle suddenly burst into motion, their defensive formation transforming into an active intercept pattern. Sarah watched in amazement as they moved with coordinated precision that no human military formation had ever achieved, each craft anticipating the movements of all the others in perfect harmony. "Viper, get clear of the engagement zone immediately," NORAD command ordered. "We're tracking energy discharges consistent with weapons fire." But Sarah was transfixed by what she was witnessing. The defending craft had opened fire on the incoming hostiles with weapons that appeared as brilliant beams of coherent energy. The attacking force responded with similar weapons. turning the sky above Seattle into a light show that was visible even in broad daylight. NORAD command. I'm observing what appears to be a space battle directly above Seattle. The defensive formation is engaging the hostile contacts with directed energy weapons. Are any of the weapons targeting ground positions? Sarah studied the engagement carefully. Despite the intensity of the aerial combat, every energy discharge was aimed at aircraft targets. None of the defending craft were firing toward the ground, even when tactically it might have made sense to use the city's buildings for cover. Negative, NORAD command. All weapons fire is focused on aerial targets only. The defending craft appear to be deliberately avoiding any risk to civilian populations. One of the hostile craft broke through the defensive line and headed directly toward downtown Seattle. Sarah watched as two of the defending craft pursued it, moving with impossible agility to intercept before it could reach populated areas. The engagement was brief but decisive. The hostile craft simply disappeared in a flash of brilliant light. NORAD command. The defensive formation just neutralized a hostile that broke through toward the city center. These defenders are definitely protecting Seattle and its population. Roger. Viper, maintain observation position and continue reporting. Sarah suddenly noticed that one of the hostile craft had broken away from the main battle and was heading directly toward her position. Her radar warning receiver exploded with alarms as the craft locked onto her F-16 with what was obviously a weapons targeting system. NORAD command. I've got a hostile locking onto my position. Request immediate support. Before NORAD could respond, one of the defending craft materialized between Sarah and the incoming threat. The defender engaged the hostile with precise energy bursts that disabled its weapon systems before destroying it completely. Sarah's F-16 hadn't even been scratched. Viper, did you just receive assistance from one of the unknown craft? NORAD command asked, their voice tight with amazement. Affirmative, NORAD command. One of the defensive craft just saved my life. It deliberately positioned itself between me and a hostile threat. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Not only were these mysterious defenders protecting Seattle, they had just protected her personally. They were distinguishing between friendly and hostile forces with surgical precision, engaging only threats while protecting both civilians and military personnel who posed no danger to them. NORAD command. I think we've been looking at this situation completely wrong, Sarah transmitted. These aren't invaders or threats. They're allies fighting a battle to protect us from something else. The aerial battle was intensifying, with more hostile craft arriving from multiple directions, but the defenders were holding their positions, creating an impenetrable shield around the Seattle metropolitan area. Sarah could see that they were taking losses. Several of the defending craft had been destroyed, but they maintained their protective formation without faltering. Viper, we're detecting seismic activity consistent with large impacts in the Cascade Mountains north of Seattle, NORAD command reported. Something big just crashed in that area. Sarah looked toward the mountains and could see smoke rising from what appeared to be a massive impact crater. The hostile forces were suffering significant casualties, but they kept coming in waves, as if they were desperately trying to reach something specific in the Seattle area. NORAD command. I think the hostiles are after a specific target in Seattle. Their attack pattern suggests they're not trying to destroy the city. They're trying to reach something or someone particular. As if responding to her observation, Sarah's radio crackled with new sounds. This time, the signals were clearly directed at her specifically. The strange language she had heard before was now accompanied by visual displays on her instrument panel, geometric patterns and symbols that seemed to be attempting communication. NORAD command. The defensive craft are trying to communicate directly with me. I'm receiving visual symbols along with the audio signals. Can you interpret any of it, Viper? Sarah studied the patterns carefully. Some of them looked almost mathematical, while others seemed to be positional diagrams. Gradually, a pattern emerged that she recognized from her training in tactical communications. NORAD command. I think they're showing me weapons capabilities and asking for assistance. The patterns look like requests for coordinate support and targeting information. That's impossible, Viper. How could they know our military communication protocols? Maybe they don't know our protocols, Sarah replied, a new understanding dawning on her. Maybe they're smart enough to figure them out by watching us. The battle was reaching a critical point. More hostile craft were arriving, and the defensive formation was being stretched to its limits. Sarah realized that her F-16, despite its limitations compared to the advanced craft around her, might actually be able to make a difference. NORAD command, requesting permission to provide targeting support to the defensive formation. My weapon systems are still operational, and I might be able to engage hostiles that break through their lines. Absolutely not. Viper, you're not equipped to engage targets of this technological level. But Sarah had already locked onto a hostile craft that was attempting to flank the main defensive position. Her AIM-120 missile might be primitive compared to the energy weapons being used around her, but it was still a deadly threat to any aircraft that didn't see it coming. Sorry, NORAD command. Sometimes you have to trust the pilot's judgment. Sarah fired her missile at the flanking hostile. The craft detected the incoming threat and attempted to engage it with point defense weapons, but the missile's approach angle and timing caught it off guard. The explosion sent the hostile craft spinning out of control, crashing into the mountains below. Immediately, the defensive craft around her began transmitting new signals. This time, the tone was unmistakably grateful. Sarah had just proven that human pilots could be effective allies in this battle, and the defenders were acknowledging her contribution. NORAD command. The defensive craft are responding positively to my engagement. I think they want to coordinate our efforts. Roger, Viper. We're scrambling additional aircraft to your position. It looks like we're about to join the most important battle in human history. Sarah smiled grimly as she banked her F-16 toward the next hostile target. This was what she had trained for her entire life, the chance to defend her country and protect innocent people. The fact that she was doing it alongside mysterious allies from beyond Earth only made the mission more critical. The sky above Seattle had become a battlefield, but for the first time since this crisis began, Sarah felt like humanity had a real chance to win. The coordinated battle above Seattle lasted for 3 hours and 17 minutes. By the time it ended, Sarah's F-16 was running on fumes, her ammunition was completely expended, and she had witnessed aerial combat that would redefine humanity's understanding of warfare and technology. Working alongside the mysterious defending craft, Sarah and the newly arrived squadron of American fighters had helped repel wave after wave of hostile attacks. The defenders had adapted their tactics to accommodate human limitations, providing electromagnetic shielding that allowed conventional aircraft to operate near their advanced weapon systems. All hostile contacts have withdrawn beyond tracking range. NORAD command finally announced. Defensive formation is maintaining perimeter, but weapons are powered down. Sarah looked around at the aftermath of the battle. Debris from destroyed hostile craft was scattered across the mountainous terrain north of Seattle, but the city itself was completely undamaged. The mysterious defenders had accomplished what seemed impossible, protecting millions of civilians while engaging in the most advanced aerial combat ever witnessed. Viper, this is General Morrison. Outstanding work today. Return to base for immediate debriefing. As Sarah banked her F-16 toward home, one of the defending craft pulled alongside her aircraft. Up close, she could see details that her cameras had missed during the heat of battle. The craft was beautiful in a way that human technology had never achieved. Elegant curves that seemed to flow like water, surfaces that shifted between metallic and translucent, and a sense of purposeful design that spoke of intelligence far beyond human capability. The craft maintained formation with her for several minutes, and Sarah could feel that she was being observed and evaluated. Then gradually it began to pull away and climb toward the other defenders maintaining their protective stations around Seattle. NORAD command. One of the defensive craft just conducted what appeared to be a farewell formation flight with me. I think they're acknowledging our cooperation in the battle. Roger, Viper. We're tracking similar behavior from several of the defensive craft. It appears they're expressing appreciation for human assistance. Landing at Nellis Air Force Base felt surreal after everything Sarah had experienced. Ground crews surrounded her aircraft immediately, eager to examine any damage or unusual readings from her encounter with technology that was decades ahead of anything in human military arsenals. Colonel Harrison was waiting for her as she climbed down from the cockpit. For the first time since she had known him, his expression held genuine respect rather than barely concealed disapproval. Martinez, you may have just helped save Seattle and possibly change the course of human history, he said quietly. I owe you an apology for doubting your capabilities. Sarah nodded, too exhausted to feel vindicated. Thank you, sir. But this is just the beginning. Those defenders are still up there, and I don't think the threat is completely over. The debriefing lasted 14 hours. Sarah was interviewed by intelligence officers, military analysts, scientists, and representatives from agencies she had never heard of. Every detail of her encounter was recorded, analyzed, and classified at the highest levels of government security. General Morrison conducted the final interview personally. Lieutenant Martinez, your actions today demonstrated exceptional judgment under unprecedented circumstances. You made first contact with an apparently friendly extraterrestrial force, successfully coordinated military operations with them, and helped protect millions of American civilians. The President himself has asked me to convey his personal gratitude. Just doing my job, ma'am, Sarah replied, though she knew that nothing about today had been routine military duty. We're recommending you for immediate promotion to captain and assignment to a new joint task force being formed to study these events. We need pilots with your experience and adaptability for what's coming next. Over the following weeks, the world learned about the Battle of Seattle through carefully controlled information releases. The official story described it as an engagement with unidentified aircraft of unknown origin, with details classified for national security reasons. But Sarah knew that the truth was far more extraordinary. The defending craft remained in position around several major cities worldwide, apparently protecting human population centers from continued hostile threats. Scientists and military analysts worked frantically to understand the technology they had witnessed, while diplomats struggled to develop protocols for communicating with intelligence that operated on completely different principles. Sarah found herself at the center of these efforts. Her unique experience as the only human pilot to successfully coordinate with the mysterious defenders made her invaluable to research teams trying to understand their capabilities and intentions. 6 months later, Captain Sarah Viper Martinez stood in a hangar at a classified location, looking at a prototype aircraft that incorporated design principles learned from studying debris recovered after the Battle of Seattle. The hybrid technology represented humanity's first attempt to bridge the gap between conventional military hardware and the advanced capabilities they had witnessed. Pretty impressive, isn't it? Asked Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead scientist on the reverse engineering project. We're calling it the Phoenix program. Human determination combined with technology we're only beginning to understand. Sarah nodded, running her hand along the sleek fuselage of the experimental aircraft. My father always said that flying was in the Martinez family blood. I don't think he could have imagined something like this. Through the hangar's open doors, she could see other pilots arriving for training on the new aircraft, men and women from around the world, all selected for their adaptability and skill in dealing with unconventional situations. The old prejudices and limitations seemed trivial now in the face of challenges that required the best humanity had to offer. Regardless of gender, nationality, or background, Captain Martinez, her radio crackled. You're needed in the briefing room. We've received new communications from the defensive formation. They appear to be requesting direct contact with you specifically. Sarah smiled and headed toward the briefing room. The mysterious defenders who had saved Seattle were still protecting Earth, still learning about humanity, still evaluating whether the people of this planet were worth their continued protection. And somehow, a young woman who had been told she didn't belong in the cockpit had become humanity's primary ambassador to the stars. As she walked through the corridors of the classified facility, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that day when Colonel Harrison had grounded her for aggressive flying. Now, that same aggressive instinct and willingness to take risks was exactly what her species needed to survive in a universe far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The sky that had once been humanity's limit had become their doorway to a larger cosmos. And Sarah Viper Martinez, the pilot who was told she didn't belong, had helped open that door for everyone who would follow. Her country had called. NORAD had needed her, and she had answered with everything she had. Now the entire world was counting on her to help navigate humanity's next great adventure among the stars.